None of that needs to go on the poster, but when you're talking about your poster, you can say, and look, we did this for 23-24. Those are the results that I'm showing here on this poster. I also did the analysis for 22-23 to 23-24. So looking at that, to see if the results were consistent, and by and large they were. So you could still bring it in that way without having to try and cram it onto the poster, because you won't have enough space to put it on the poster.
Okay, yeah.
How does that sound? Yeah. And then the second email you said, so I had.
It just didn't make sense in my head, so I rephrased it there.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I thought you were referring to a different one. Yeah, no, that's fine. That's perfect. And I know I sent you on an email previously with a different graph. You don't need to include that other graph that I did. You can if you want, obviously, if you think it's relevant. If it's not, that's absolutely fine. But it's just playing around with different ways of showing the data. The reason I was playing with it is because we might have a conversation after the rest of your assignments finish, because I want to do two things. I want to actually pull this together into a presentation for Connacht, and then see if Connacht want us to give a presentation either online or in person. So I'll have a chat to you about what that might look like if they want to do that, and what we'll do for that. But that's the kind of graph that we might do as an extra one for them. Doesn't need to in your piece unless you think you like it and you think it tells the story well. Then you're welcome to use it. But if not, that's absolutely fine as well. The reason I didn't do it first and foremost is because it's easier to do the statistics on the bar charts that we did in the last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that's probably an easier way to present the data than that one. But I like the graphic that shows the more you play, the more you stay. So it kind of has advantages both.
I can
Right.
as well for the title just before. Can I call it a quantitative assessment, or would I just leave that out and just say an assessment of youth player retention?
Nope. Put quantitative if you want.
Okay,
no problem with that. Makes sense. Okay. Charlie, are you ready to go?
Yeah.
I will get you to share your screen if that's all right.
Yeah.
Stephen, I want you to concentrate on the visuals. So what do you like? What ideas are you going to steal? What would you change about the visual presentation of the poster here? I'll get you to give some feedback to Charlie after he's finished. I'm going to give some feedback on the actual content and delivery. Okay with that, Stephen?
Yep.
Perfect. Charlie, over to you.
Can you see the screen yet?
Looks good.
Perfect.
And we can see your cursor as well, so if you want to use that to illustrate anything, the same as you would point to the poster, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, so exploring methodological profiling of session, or sorry, I can't see that. Where did I go? Exploring methodological approaches in longitudinally profiling session sequencing in Gaelic football. So my introduction. So Gaelic football practices often follow a traditional linear structure from skill drills to games. Games-based approach pedagogies such as TGFU and GameSense integrate tactical and technical learning through game forms. There is a lack of research examining sequencing longitudinally, so there is research looking at it cross-sectionally and just taking individual sessions at different points in the season. So the purpose of this study was to explore the methodological options in profiling longitudinally within high-performance Gaelic football. So our design, we used a mixed methods exploratory, so that combined both quantitative and qualitative. The qualitative was there to explain the quantitative, and we had 8 high-level coaches, so they were either inter-county, university, or senior club, with all with over 10 years coaching experience. So the initial quantitative phase was we had 165 sessions. It was an average of 21 sessions per coach, I think, roughly, or not. Sorry. There was diagrams, videos, notes, and then all the activities were coded using a complexity index. 0 complexity was the conditioning, and 6 would be a full-sided game. So on the left here, you can see an example of a session. So that started with skills and isolation. They went to drills, then up to a condition game, and finished with a full-sided game. That's just an example of how a session would look. Then the qualitative phase, we interviewed one coach. It was a 45-minute semi-structured interview with the coach we'll call John, and this was just to contextualize the sequencing trends. Our interview then was analyzed using an adapted thematic analysis. We didn't use all of the steps. So then the results showed 10 new sequencing patterns were identified, expanding beyond the 15 previously listed, including examples like variable complex play and special purpose sessions, which we felt was necessary. The coach's practices varied. So coach 4, for example, used only 9 sessions, but he used them in a cycle throughout the year, while some coaches had fixed plans and others adapted week on week. So then from the coach perspective, John described sequencing as a longitudinal process. He didn't see it as session. He didn't see it as just sequencing one session. He saw it as sequencing across a whole week or 2 weeks. He layered complexity across these sessions to meet his tactical goals, and then he emphasized adaptability and raised concerns that some of his activities were labeled as skills in isolation when he believes that they should be down as patterns of play. So the coding getting onto that, then coding challenges. Sessions were submitted in varying formats. There was notes, diagrams, video, as said, but there was inconsistent detail. So the inter-rater reliability was strong at 89.2%, but inter-rater testing was not feasible. The lack of standardization complicated the coding, suggesting a need for coaches to code themselves in the future. So longitudinally sequencing, coaches use session design strategically across weeks, not just within individual practices, as said. Adaptability versus structure. So some coaches build a stable cycle or just stable practices, while others like to respond dynamically to opposition, fatigue, and the context week on week. So our coding limitations, coach reflections highlighted the ambiguity in coding hybrid activities. For example, the patterns of play labeled as skills in isolation, where it's kind of in between two. And the mixed methods was a great advantage because the graphs identified the trends that we saw, and the interviews reveal intent and the nuance, and also gave us insights that we hadn't seen before. And just to conclude, sequencing in Gaelic football is highly context dependent, and finding support integrating visual profiling and coach opinions into future research and education.
Okay, very nice. So I'm going to run through a few comments. Would you mind to just keep that up on the screen, just so we can do that? And are you both happy if I record this, just to make it easier for you to catch the different comments that I'm going to make?
Yeah, no worries.
Lovely. Thank you very much, both. Excuse me. Apologies. Just hit record. Okay, so broadly speaking, I thought you did that really nicely. I thought you walked through that well. I think there's a clear storyline there. And so my comments are really about tidying up the elements of the story and tightening up what you do, as opposed to any major changes. I think, what you've got is a nice story, and that's good to work with. If you look at the introduction, I think the first point and the first statement works really well. Gaelic football practices follow a traditional linear structure from skill drills to gameplay. So it's all about the sequence. But your second bullet point actually doesn't explicitly mention sequence.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean by integrate tactical, and I know how that connects, but I think you could just rewrite that one to make the sequence part of it more explicit. And now best not to put GBA if you can't fit game-based approaches, e.g. TGFU, game sense, propose a different sequence, game, practice, game, or play, practice, play, or something like that. We might do it well. I think there's probably worth, if you can, merging those two into one point.
Okay.
So Gaelic football practices often follow a traditional linear structure from skills to gameplay, but game-based approaches propose a different sequence. So that's one point.
Yeah.
Because I think it's worth putting the Hayes FYP from last year in there as a separate bullet point. I know you have it there in your method, but I think something along the lines of cross-sectional studies of a cross-sectional study of coaches sequencing has reported diverse sequences used. That might actually be enough, because I think what you could do is Gaelic football practices often follow a traditional linear structure. You could actually cite Hayes there in support of that. So the evidence for that comes from Hayes in part.
Okay.
So then your next point is cross-sectional studies have documented diverse session sequences used by coaches, but there's a lack of research examining coaches' longitudinal use of sequencing. So I don't know if it's longitudinal use, maybe play with how you phrase that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the variation in sequencing within coaches. Maybe that's the phrase, the variation in sequencing within coaches. I think that's the phrase that needs to go in there.
Perfect.
To explore the methodological options to profile longitudinal session sequencing within high-performance Gaelic football coaches. So in your verbal explanation, I would be very clear so just to emphasize this, our goal was not to map what coaches do longitudinally, but to explore how a bigger project, what are the methods a bigger project could use in order to best understand that. And so again, just be really explicit in the verbal, what you've written is fine, but just reinforce it in the verbal piece. And then this is something, and this is a broader lesson, so Stephen, as well, for you to come back to as well, just to keep an eye on for your stuff. Make sure you're coming back to that purpose in your results and in your discussion. So this is about what are the methodological lessons that we can learn. Are you really emphasizing the methodological lessons later on? And I'll come on to that in a second. Methods-wise, okay, so design is fine, participants is nice. I think the qualitative, quantitative phase that you've got there is nicely broken down as well. I think the complexity index, you need to spend a little bit more time explaining.
Okay.
And I think what would help with that is if you didn't just have 1 to 6 on that graph on the y-axis, but you actually had the labels, conditioning, drills, skills in isolation, applied skills, small-sided games, etc.
Yeah.
And then you can actually explain, the complexity index goes from the furthest away from a full-sided game of football, which is isolated conditioning without the ball, all the way up to an actual full-sided game. And so we say that a small-sided game is more like the game than skills in isolation, which is more like the game than you work it down. So just a little bit more explanation there, I think, will be helpful.
Okay.
Just looking at the graph, why have you chosen that particular session sequence to illustrate?
Because it's a varying one. So it goes up, or it goes down, then goes up, and I just think that one. I was looking at a few, and there was obviously most of them were simple to complex, but I found that this one was kind of, I don't know, it just showed variation. I didn't want just one kind of straight line up.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think the variation is good. The reason I'm pausing and asking you is because that still starts with training form, if I'm reading it correctly.
Yeah.
So if you had one that actually started with playing form and was an example of a GBA sequence, it just might be a slightly easier explanation for you.
Yeah.
So here's somebody who used 1, 2, 3, 4 activities in the session. They start with a game, go down to some training form, back up to a game, and then finish the full-sided game. And so, but this is, we're mapping sequences like this, and then we are coding now. I think the other bit that's missing, and Stephen, I might get your reaction to this as well, maybe a little bit later on. The bit for me that's missing is an explanation of that coding process. Because you've got activities coded using a complexity index. That's not quite the coding. It's probably more that their activities were maybe mapped using a complexity index, but the coding is actually, is this a simple to complex? Is this a game immediate practice back up to game? Is it, so it's actually what's the code that they ended in, what's the theme that they belong in? So I think there's something needed there in terms of the various themes to which that session could belong. Okay, so what does that look like? I wonder, so you have 5 themes that they could land into?
Yeah.
I wonder if you, because you have a bit of space, I think you could squash that graph over to the left a little bit and create a bit of space there in white in the middle. And I think in there, I would just put, and I put a box around it, so it's in the same figure as the graph. I would have your 5 themes using the same color code that you have in the graph.
Yeah.
But I just have the names. So it's like a table, a 1-column table, where you've got the 5 themes and the names of each of the themes. You could have the numbers for the code that belong each one as well. And then I would have an arrow going from your graph into the GBA theme. So you could say, look, based on the characteristics of each graph, we coded them as, if it was, in this case, it's a game-based approach because it goes down and goes up here, so it lands into this theme. However, if it was a simple to complex, if it started here and just went straight up, it would go into this theme. If the only thing they did was play a full-sided game, it would go into the special purpose theme. So you're just explaining a couple of examples of that. But I think to help get that coding bit across, you just need to have the themes that they were coded into. And I think one example diagram and an arrow into the specific theme it belongs to, that would help with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Perfect.
If it doesn't at any stage, because I know I'm trying to explain things here with in words, which is possibly easier to draw sometimes, but I think that would really help in terms of the method side. Yeah, I've talked about that one. I think you can expect a question. You should definitely get a question. When you say adapted thematic analysis, I would be astonished if you didn't get the question, how did you adapt it and why did you adapt it? So again, you can prep the answer to that. That would be quite good. Again, question I'd expect, you collected data from 8 coaches, but you only interviewed 1.
Yeah.
Why? And again, you have to answer it now, but we'll come back and that's maybe one again that you might expect. Okay, results. The big one for me in terms of the results, as you were talking through there, I don't think you made reference to that diagram once.
No.
The multicolored one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that definitely needs to be built into your explanation. And it's there, it's coaches practice varied. And so here's an example of one of the coaches and the way in which, when we look longitudinally, we see that their session sequences are actually in 4 out of the 5 themes. And they're, they maybe have a sequence there's variation sometimes within each theme.
Yeah.
sometimes actually they're quite consistent. Is GBA the middle one, the blue one?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So when he uses the GBA, he's really consistent in his use of GBA. There's a little bit more variation in use of simple to complex, but still largely the same sequence. So using different sequence themes, but largely consistent within the scene. So you can actually talk about what that graph is showing. That's quite nice. And I think that'll be a good one to talk through in terms of the coach practice varied.
Okay.
Were all of the coaches like that? Where they had session sequences and different themes and variation or lack of variation within each theme?
They all, like, there was a lot of variation with that. Like, some coaches had stayed in the same team but had variations in that team. Others had just, as Niall was just 92% in the simple to complex. So they're all varying, really.
So either you verbally explain that, because actually if you make that graph smaller, it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
But you could still verbally. So now, not all coaches look like this. Some coaches, they were all within this simple to complex. They were quite variable within there, but they're all within that one piece. Other coaches were, so you can verbally explain it. Maybe I play around with, could you get 2 graphs? Could you get 4 graphs in a panel where you're showing the different variations? That might work, but it might be too small. So I just play with that in terms of the thing, what it looks like.
Yeah.
Okay, 10 new sequencing patterns were identified. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Coach practice varied. I think that the point you're missing from that one is that explanation of the graph type piece. So coach practice is varied. Maybe is there a bullet point? Some coaches were consistently within a theme. Others used session sequences or sequences from multiple themes. The other bits are fine. Coach perspective. The interviewed coach describes sequencing as a longitudinal process. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether to use longitudinal or long-term process by the layering of complexity. I think longitudinal being used again is maybe not great.
So I wonder, could you merge the first 2 bullet points? So the interviewed coach thought about sequencing across sessions, not just within sessions.
Yeah.
I.e., he layered complexity across sessions. So I think that's the way to merge that, and then it's just explained a bit more simply.
Yeah.
He emphasized adaptability, again, in the sequence that he used. In the verbal piece, you could say it. You don't need to add any more words there, but you can just verbally say it. Adaptability in the sequence, because it's all about the sequence.
Yeah.
And raise concerns that some activities labeled as it. That's fine. Coding challenges, varying formats with inconsistent detail. I don't think you need the notes, diagrams, video there because you set it up above. That will just save you a line if you delete that.
Yeah.
Intra-rater reliability was strong. I would just I'd get rid of the inter-rater testing bit and just say, but the lack of standardization complicated inter-rater coding.
Okay.
And I like your coach letter templated submissions. That makes a lot of sense. No, that's fine. So discussion, coaches use session design strategically across weeks. Okay, so longitudinal sequencing. So what have we learned about future research? Well, we need to think about sequencing differently. This is not just something within a session. We need to think across sessions. Why? Because, well, this example coach was thinking across sessions, and that might be happening more broadly. We also think about adaptability versus structure. That's fine. I think you can explain that really nicely. coding limitations. Coding limitations. There's a little bit of repetition there.
Yeah.
Between the results and the discussion.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. I wonder if you could reorganize that. What are the lessons that you've learned? I wonder if could you reorganize them in terms of the first two bullet points for me come under what to investigate or what to measure. So when we think about sequencing, it's not just within, it's also across.
Yep.
And we also should look at the adaptability versus the structure in terms of that the coaches are doing. That's what we should look at, and then how we should look at it. It's about clarifying the coding definitions, and it's about the coach-led template or coach-led or templated submissions. So I think that could come in there. So I wonder if you could maybe rephrase those initial 3 bullet points into, we've learned lessons about what to code, we've learned lessons about how to code, and then the mixed methods advantage. Absolutely, that works really well as a separate lesson. So actually, it's really worthwhile to invest in the interviews as well. A lot of rich data comes out of that one.
Yeah.
So conclusion, sequencing is highly context dependent, finding support, integrating visual profiling and coaching opinions into future research and education. Finding support, integrating visual profiling. What do you mean by visual profiling?
So the 2 graphs essentially showing a session like we have it up there with the complexity index, and also then visually on the longitudinal scatter plot.
So can I suggest that what you do is you label those graphs figure 1 and figure 2?
Okay.
And then in brackets, integrating visual profiling, open brackets, figure 1, figure 2, close bracket, and coach opinions. Maybe coach interviews as opposed to coach opinions into future research and education.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's loads of really good stuff there. As I say, it's mostly tidying up. There's a few playing around options, but hopefully that tightens things up a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Stephen, visually, what feedback have you got for us?
I think majority is good. Maybe a small bit text heavy, but Charlie also said about 10 words. I have no clue what they mean, so having them in front of me reading them is a good positive about it anyways. Maybe more graphs, but I wouldn't know much about a study, so is there a necessity to actually put graphs on his template? Maybe not.
Yeah. I think you want to have as little text as possible, but I don't know if there's much text here that's not required. I've given some examples of how it can be shortened and condensed a little bit. So play with that certainly. But I think you've done well. We've talked about adding in an extra bit to the figure 1, which just has the themes to map into that as well. So I think that'll visualize it up a little bit. Play with whether you could do 2 graphs, because I think that graph will work if you squash it.
Okay.
That second graph, the colored one.
Yeah.
If you make that it's same width but make it shorter, I think that'll still work. So I think you could fit 2 graphs there to illustrate 2 different coaches' profiles.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's figure 2A, figure 2B, and I think that will assist in terms of getting that information up as well. Yeah, but otherwise that looks pretty good. I think the other one I will say is you've got the full references down the bottom.
Yeah.
You can use the short form of references, the kind of an abbreviated reference.
Okay.
So that might save you a line or two, and just every line you can save can be helpful at times.
Perfect.
You've got the University of Limerick logo twice.
Yeah, see on the module outline it says to have the University of Limerick logo and also the PES logo.
Okay, fair enough.
But I was thinking that as well. I was kind of like, would one just do? I was also thinking, would I have the GA logo, but
No, not because it wasn't officially in
Okay.
combination with those. So no, in terms of that particular one. Yeah, I think you could nearly play with that. So the logo, the department logo on a white background almost looks better. So you could almost make that bit bigger and
Yeah.
just use that one, and then have the type a little offset to the side. But it's fine. It's not a major thing.
Okay.
Any other observations, Stephen?
Oh, I think all's well. Otherwise, I think he definitely needs a bulk bit of text because there's so much happening, so many tests and everything like that. So an explanation for everything's pretty good. I don't know about maybe there's not a lot of room, but how small would that font be, or is that, do we have a specific, like, is that font given to us? Is that what we have to use, Charlie? Or
the font, is it?
yeah,
Yeah, I think it has to be either a Royal or Arial or whatever it's called,
Yeah.
or one of
If you have a
one of
look,
the
there
others.
should be guidance in the module outline or the module
Yeah.
handbook. There should be guidance on that there. Okay, lovely. So I'll get you to stop sharing there, Charlie, but that's
Yeah.
kind of a solid bit of feedback there. I know, Stephen, that you're kind of a little bit further behind on aspects of it, but hopefully listening in to the types of questions that I asked, things like you said adapted how, adapted why. Those are the kind of things you can set up questions, so have a think about what do you want to be asked a question about, what do you think they might ask a question. You can almost predict sometimes what those will be.
Yeah.
Stephen, I appreciate you haven't got a poster yet, but do you want to do a run through of what your message is going to be, or what your kind of talk is going to be?
I'm still kind of doing my FYP as well at the moment. I'm kind of
Yeah, I know.
rushing to get this done, so my head's a bit skewed ways. I wouldn't even know much what to talk about, like what results I'd really want to fixate on.
To emphasize. Okay, that's no problem. Sometimes doing this though can be a useful exercise. We won't do it live now, but it might be no harm just to take 5 minutes, piece of paper, and just write down the answers to these 4 questions, because what goes on the poster is really also what goes in your conclusion, what goes in your abstract for the actual FYP. So it just helps give you that little bit of clarity. So why did we do this is question 1. What did we do? What did we find? What does it mean? And when it comes to your what did we find, those are your 3 questions. So I'd expect in your results section of your poster, you've got 3 sections, 1 section for each of those 3 questions, and that captures that.
Okay.
Charlie, have you any final questions for me?
No, I'll get cracking on those changes.
Do crack on and enjoy that. Stephen, any other questions you got for me?
Maybe a small bit in the FYP, but the actual report. But
you can head off, Charlie, if you want, and we'll catch
Thanks
up
very
again.
much.
Look forward to seeing you on Tuesday in the final product.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, go for it, Stephen.
Just for
you can share your screen if it helps.
I can, yeah. Is that sharing the right screen? Yes, it should be.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can see a document there.
Yeah. So, is it too small or?
No, it's fine.
Okay. I am struggling with the word count. I was wondering how much. Like, I know obviously you're not supposed to go over it, but how much can you go over it?
Okay, so a couple of things. Number 1, your tables and your figure captions don't count within your word count.
Yeah.
So your reference list doesn't count within your word count.
Mm-hmm.
Your abstract doesn't count within your word count. So when you take all those things out, does that bring you closer to it's 4,000 words, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually don't have my abstract is my last thing I'm writing. Just I find it easier to do, so I don't actually have my abstract in this yet. So I'm at around 5,000, I'd say, words when you're supposed to
If you
be
go
at
down, just
4,000.
highlight have you got your references list in it?
Yeah, I still have 3 to add, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Just check how many words is in the reference list?
273.
So you're about 5,500. If you scroll on up,
I have to edit my introduction. Actually, it's probably my methods. My results is very heavy, but I can condense them into an appendix now. Obviously, an appendices, so that could limit it a good bit. There is. I have to work on my introduction. I definitely can get the word count down on that, and then the methods. Maybe I could shorten this. I have from what we've done in the ethics form, and then maybe I could. I don't know. I don't know what pieces to take out of the methods, if even. And then I have the data
Yep.
collection, data management, and then confidentiality, and then the processing and the analysis. So all of which are relevant. I just don't know if some of it can be taken out, or obviously time's short. Do I have till midday or 12 in the evening?
Yeah, she said 12 a.m., wasn't it?
I asked for that, but I don't know. She said 12 noon. I took that as midday.
Yeah, 12 noon is midday.
I thought it was the evening. But
Okay.
I should be okay to get it.
So, if you push it on up to the top, do you know what? At this stage, what I'll say to you is don't worry about that word length because I'm the primary person who's looking at this document, and a lot of this is going to be again, a lot of those words are captured up in the tables. If you highlight any one of your tables there, they're big. There's going to be a couple of hundred words of those. You've got 3 or 4 tables that suddenly captures up quite a bit. So I'm not overly concerned by that. Just double check that this is all accurate. You've got 2015-16 season written up there at the top of the methods. Just have a quick scan through to make sure that is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Lovely. If you go down to the end, I saw one thing about where you finished the discussion.
Where I finish it.
Do you have a conclusion?
Yes. I took it out though because the word count was so much. So I put it on a different word and then highlight what I think I need, highlight what I don't think, and then get rid of it. Right now, my conclusion is not great at all.
Yeah, I think you do definitely need a conclusion.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So even if it's a short one, pop it in. If you scroll up a small bit, was there something on relative age effect there on the bottom of that top page? Yeah. Now, are you doing relative age effect?
Yeah.
You ran that analysis as well.
Yeah, I got all the questions, and then I furthered the appearance one with the starting and the subs. Otherwise, they're basically mainly the same. And then I've crossed I think it was the age grade one I did for multiple years, and possibly appearance. I'm not 100% sure on that though. If I've done it fully.
Yeah, okay. In which case, I'll make an executive ruling on it. And hang on, let me record this so you have it in writing. So in this instance, I'm going to give you permission to ignore the word count and just fire it in. Now, that doesn't mean you get an extra 6,000 words to pop in, but add your conclusion, have a tidy up. If there's anything there that can go in an appendix, that's fine, but don't worry about trying to cut down 2,000 words off it. Just pop it in as is.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Yeah.
You've that is to the record. Okay. Any other questions?
Um. No, I'm pretty happy otherwise. I'll just move all of them from the prior years down to the appendices, put in my conclusion and abstract. I just need to tidy up a bit of my introduction because that is a bit all over the shop. And then I think I'm happy with it then.
Okay. How are you doing? Oh, so apart from project wise, how are you doing personally? Because there's the extra stress that comes in and everything else.
Don't talk to me. It's just my sister is quite ill, so I have to look after her. And then my dad has sciatica, so that's even worse. He can't even get up off the couch half the time. So, and then there's 5 other kids running around, or 4 other kids, sorry, running around that we need to look after. So I'm hot and heavy doing helping hands, working and trying to get projects done.
And are you the eldest?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so definitely don't worry about word count on that side of it. Pop in what you can of it. And when do you have to get the poster in by?
Monday at 3. 3, yeah.
Monday at 3, okay. I'm actually teaching all Monday until 1:30. So probably won't get a chance to look at anything that you've got poster wise. But I think between Adam's example and between that conversation with Charlie, hopefully there's enough guidance for you there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, I better leave you to crack on with that, and we'll catch you on Tuesday.
Yes, thanks very much, Phil. Cheers for that.
Take care of yourself, Stephen. Bye bye.
Look.